things that you need to mention in your answers to get a good score, right? So let's see it with an example here. So here in the world history, I've taken World War I, wherein, as I said, the timelines become important from 1914 to 1918, and the important events. When you're reading ethics, there are other three subjects. The example that I've taken is animal rights here. There's a dilemma whether the strategy or the structure will change according to the paper. For example, smart cities was asked both in GS1. Hello everyone, hope all of you are safe and healthy. Welcome to IS Baba's series on answer writing, that is Aware, wherein I'll be taking you through 7 steps to master answer writing skills. And so these are the 7 steps, and I hope you watched the first 4 steps where I've discussed about the myths about answer writing, the first principle behind answer writing, how do you approach answer writing, and how do you structure an answer, the 5 different ways of introducing an answer, 5 different ways of concluding an answer, and also the importance of keywords, that is examine, critically examine, discuss, comment. Almost 14 to 15 keywords I've discussed in detail. And also in my previous video, the importance of presentation, the difference between good, bad and average presentation, and also how can you integrate diagrams, flowcharts, tree diagrams, or maps, or even Abend scope model, different kinds of diagrammatical representation of your answers. So if you have not watched, do watch it. And in today's discussion, I'll be taking you through whether there are dilemmas, like whether you should have a different strategy for different papers, whether if the similar topic comes in GS1 and 2 or GS1 and 3, whether your structure or your points will change, right? All that. So in fact, that happened in 2016 UPSC paper, where smart city was asked in both in GS1 and GS3. Right. Anyway, I'll be discussing with examples here, and most importantly, the value additions which are specific to each paper. And each paper also, there is more specificity in terms of geography, society, or history, or what are the value additions required in GS2, GS3, right? Which will help you to score that 450 plus or 470 plus, right? Along with your presentation and structure, which is very important in answer writing. So these are the things that I'll be discussing in today's session. So let's first start off with value additions with respect to each paper. In GS1, the history part. In history, the treaties, the agreements, then the important events, the cause and the consequences of that event becomes important. The important leaders, rulers, personalities, or even poets of that time becomes important. The battles, important battles fought, right? And also the quotes. So these are the 4 to 5 important ingredients or specific things that you need to mention in your answers to get a good score, right? So let's see it with an example here. So here I've in the world history, I've taken World War I, wherein, as I said, the timelines become important from 1914 to 1918, and the important events, right? The assassination of Duke Ferdinand was the initial spark to World War I, right? So with that, the Hungary and I think Austria, right, along with the support of Germany, started waging the war against Serbia, and later Russia and Britain, all of them joined, right? So that is one important which actually led to the start of World War I, and finally it gets ended with respect to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Right. So here one of the battles can be mentioned, if at all. Like, not every battle becomes important. Like, for example, Battle of Gallipoli, right, where you can easily remember, right, that can be put so that gives you more authenticity. That tells the examiner that this person has put in efforts, and he or she knows that he has read thoroughly, and that is the reason he's put this key point. So that makes your answer much better. That enriches your answer. Clear? So here in Treaty of Versailles, the important points would be the big 4, that is the Great Britain, the US, France and Italy, right? So that can be mentioned, or the important personalities here, leaders like Woodrow Wilson's 14 points can be mentioned. That gives more authenticity to your answers. Clear? Let's move on to the next part, that is the coinage in India. So this I've taken in terms of the ancient and the medieval history of India, where how the coinage has evolved over the period, and what does it actually signify, right? The transition of the coinage, wherein initially it was during the Indus Valley times, you can see the punch marked coins, it started off with that. Then during the Maurya's times, the metallic and the copper coins came into vogue. Then the gold coins were introduced during the Gupta's time. But what does this coins depict? Whether the culture, at time, different periods, it depicts different things. For example, during the Gupta's times, right, it depicts Samudra Gupta playing a veena, right? Or during the Chola times, where depicts the symbol of the political system, Nandi is represented there. So this is the transition that you can see in coinage system in India. So when you study like this also, it becomes very important. See, especially with respect to medieval history and ancient history, students find it difficult to remember things, right? So you need to have this timeline approach, the chronological important events, and not every event or every battle becomes important or every king becomes important. For example, if you take the Gupta dynasty, the most important ruler for me was Samudragupta here, who was also called the Indian Napoleon, right? Because of his conquests, and he had never fought, lost a battle, all that. And why was this Gupta period called the Golden Age? Because of its inventions and discoveries, not only in terms of art and culture, but also in terms of science and tech, astronomy, etc., and literary works, right? So that significance, or even the most important poet during that time, Kalidasa, his works on Abhignana Shakuntala or Meghaduta, right? These important facts that you mention carries more weightage in your GS1, especially when in GS1 is more factual. You consider geography or the history part, right? This will get you that 110 plus, right? That is the in GS1, right? So this is how we can study. Or coming to medieval history, for example, during Akbar's time, something like something new that was introduced. Not only Akbar's time, any of the rulers, something new they have introduced in terms of the political setup or in terms of agrarian setup, they can come into picture here. Ibdat Khana was a symbol of secularism, right, where people from different religions came together at a single place, where they discussed, they propagated their spiritual teachings in that place. So, or the administrative system, Akbar introduced Mansabdari system, where both the civil and the military power was placed under one head. So this is how you should actually read it. Even coming to economics, well, during each kingdom, like what is the occupation then, whether agriculture or was it trade, right? And what was the art and architecture during that period. So if you can divide it into three parts like this, it becomes very easy for you to recollect things. And even value additions, as I said, not everything becomes important. The first and the most important things. Not every ruler also becomes important. Even if you remember one or two and their important contribution, that would suffice for you. Clear? And so these are the value addition that becomes important here. And let's move on to the next one, that is Indian freedom movement. As I said, again, the timeline becomes important, where the ground rule comes into picture, to the social reformist, then moderate phase, then the extremist phase, the Gandhian phase, and the partition phase. And here, for example, if I take the Gandhian phase, the important events here, Champaran movement, or the civil disobedience movement, Quit India movement, right? All this can come into place. And apart from Gandhiji, there are other important leaders like Rajendra Prasad or Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. All these leaders can be mentioned. That gives more authenticity to your answers. Clear? And not only this, the other personalities or like governor generals, that can come into picture. For example, Lord Ripon was considered the father of local self-government, or William Bentinck, during whose time the abolition of sati happened, or even Lord Curzon. There were many controversial policies implemented by him, of course, in terms of partition or in terms of education, but also he had done good works in terms of preserving the monuments and heritage of India. So that event, that contribution, that name, right, gives you more marks again. Or even the quotes, as I said, like, so during the extremist phase, Subhash Chandra Bose says, "Give me the blood and I'll give you the freedom." Or Lord Dufferin is criticality about Indian National Congress, saying that it's a microscopic minority, right? All that. So these things adds on value to your answers, more value. Clear? Yeah. Coming to the geography part. In geography, the maps and diagrams become important, and I've explained this in detail in the presentation, that is step 4 of the this series. And also this maps and becomes important in international relations and internal security as well. Clear? So here I've taken an example of precipitation. So what are the things that you can use if the question is on precipitation? So let's see, here you can see the flow chart here, the cyclic approach, or the orographic rainfall diagram. You can draw it. It need not be as perfect as this, right? A simple diagram which I had shown you in that step 4 presentation, and even the monsoons, the wind flowing there, all that, right? Or coming to statistics, anything like with respect to water, if it is the question on water, then you can say basically here statistics here, the groundwater is a major important source for irrigation. In fact, groundwater is used for drinking purpose, then irrigation purpose and industries, but majority, that is 64%, is used for irrigation. So facts like this can be mentioned. Clear? Moving to the society part of it. In society, what becomes important is the societal social factors like health, education, sanitation, women, children, the vulnerable sections of the society, or the family system, the caste system, the festivals, right? All this play an important role, and most importantly, the lifestyle of the people. So here I've taken an example of globalization. If the question is on globalization, what are the important value additions you can give? So coming to it, as I said, the globalization has made a drastic impact on the family system, moving to the nuclear families, or even the marriages where more of westernized form of culture is being practiced, resort marriages or ring ceremonies, or how it has impacted the caste system, or new concepts like McDonaldization, Walmartization, the fast food culture that has come into India. So all that can be represented here. Or even here, coming to the other part, that is reports and schemes. Here with respect to globalization, more than reports and schemes, I would say the indexes becomes important, like global inequality index or global happiness index or peace and livability index, which are nothing but social benchmarkers comparing Indian society with other society or vice versa, right? Again, these are social indicators as well. They indicates whether how good the society is to live, right? So coming to the quotes, even global village is not homogeneous. So this is one quote that you can give. Or with respect to current affairs, there are many examples wherein, especially during the COVID times, how it is impacted in terms of migration or Brexit happening, or US's protectionist measures, how it is impacting the education and the lives of the people of India, right? All this can be the important value additions that you can give under society. Clear? Let's move on to the next part. And before that, I would like to emphasize that, as I said, there is a good chance of scoring 110 plus in GS1, provided that these important value additions and facts are stated. And as I said, not every fact becomes important. I've given you examples also. So if you can follow that, I think you can really do well in GS1. Coming to GS2, polity, the important value additions or specific ingredients that enriches your answer is the constitution, the articles or amendments, then Supreme Court judgments, then reports and committee reports and recommendations, then indexes, like it can be sustainable development goals index or other inequality indexes, then the case studies and the best practices. So in public administration, we call it as comparative public administration, and here it is basically the best practices that is followed in other country and how you can implement in our country, right? So these are the things that enriches your answer. So let's see it. Like here the topic is privacy. So when it comes to privacy, the constitution articles are 19, 21, the new IT rules or other new amendments put to it, all that can be one part of discussion here. Then even here the law commission report, all that, or even Punji commission, ARC2 reports are the other value additions of GS2. And coming to privacy part here, the Supreme Court judgment, here it is with respect to case Puttaswamy case, that fact becomes important, or the committee with respect to Sri Krishna committee becomes important value addition here. And as I said, the case studies or international practices, like how the Western countries deal with privacy law, or the recent issues with coming to current affairs, WhatsApp private policies versus government of India. Here Europe, that is GDPR is nothing but general data protection regulation of US, like how the rules are with respect to the companies protecting the private data of European citizens. So these are the things that you can write to enrich your GS2 paper. Clear? So let's move on to the next one, that is international relations. In international relations, the treaty, the agreements, the different pacts, the military pacts, the INS Vikramaditya or Sukhoi, Su-25, 30, all that, those things, whatever agreements that we have, the military pacts we had becomes important. And most importantly here, you can have this 4C approach, that is conflict, competition, collaboration and convergence. Yeah, so this is the approach that you can have. So here I've taken with respect to India and China. So let's see what are the conflict that we have first. Obviously, when it comes to conflict, there's boundary issues, we have water issues, with respect to Tsangpo or the Brahmaputra river. Then the other country that comes to our mind whenever we speak about China, it is the Pakistan, or other neighboring nation. And the recent standoffs like Doklam controversy or Galvan Valley issue, where soldiers were killed, right? So these are the conflict areas of with respect to India and China. And coming to the competition part, see here, competition should be seen as a race. It is not about knocking somebody or putting a nuclear bomb and you going ahead, right? It is a kind of an healthy competition, kind of. It is competition with respect to raw materials and markets. The best example is India and China's policies with respect to Africa, which is Africa, as you all know, very rich in resources. Or the other Indian neighboring countries, be it Sri Lanka to Bhutan to Nepal, China's policies versus India's policies, right? They're competing for markets, they're competing for resources here. And the best example would be the India Sri Lanka, wherein the northeastern port, I think it is Trincomalee port, right? Trincomalee port, wherein it was initially given to the Indian government, and later I think in this year it was again given back to China. So again there's a competitive things involved here. And then coming to collaboration, see, there's a difference between collaboration and convergence. Both are cooperation. It is in line with cooperation itself. Collaboration is cooperation at the present times, and convergence is cooperation in the future. Right now that might be a conflict, but in future that can be a point of cooperation. So right now the collaboration points are different regional groupings that we have in terms of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS we have, or ASEAN, wherein we discuss about different from political to finance to climate change, etc. Then the other example is the financial part, that is New Development Bank or Asian Infrastructure Bank, where India and China are part of it. So these are the examples of collaboration. And coming to the convergence part, that is the issues that we have, which can be, where a cooperation can be achieved in the future stage. That is especially with respect to the terrorism, where China is also supported by blacklisting Masood Azhar, or in terms of larger goals like climate change, or being the heads of G77, the leaders of G77, where anything to prevent the hegemony of the Western countries or these third world countries, where both of them can play a major role. Or even water diplomacy, of course it is an issue right now, but the water diplomacy will help in sharing the water in a better way, right? And also prevent the flooding, etc. So these are the examples that I can give with respect to convergence. So these are the value additions with respect to international relations. So if this is clear, let's move on to the next one, that is the economics part of it. GS3. So when I say economics or GS3 paper, the important value additions are data and facts, and the sources would be economic survey, budget, Niti Aayog reports, the indexes like sustainable development goals, or the ease of doing businesses. Then the government schemes and policies become important here, right? And again, examples, current affairs examples, or best practices can also be the other value additions. So let's see it through an example here. So the demographic dividend. So here, according to the data given in the economic survey and budget, it says 8%, only 8% of the youth are employable. Here, the other facts also can be mentioned, like more than 50% of the population are below 25 years of age in India, or more than 65% of the population are below 35 years of age. So that can be mentioned here. And then the schemes and laws. So here the schemes are nothing but the Startup India or Skill India program, or even National Health Mission, or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, wherein schemes are implemented to leverage the demographic dividend. So that can be mentioned here. Or coming to committee, the Sharda Prasad committee report, that is the committee that you can mention here with respect to demographic dividend. And the other reports like Skill India, Indian Skill India report. So these are the things that will add more value to your answer. So this is the example that I can give you here. And moving on to the next one, that is ethics part of it. So you have to remember that when you're reading ethics, there are other three subjects that will support it. One is the polity or the governance part of it, The second is the history, wherein mythology and ancient and the national movement becomes important. Then the philosophy and the quotes become important. So these are the value additions with respect to GS3. So let's see it through an example here. So the example that I've taken is animal rights here. So here, as I said, the laws, Supreme Court judgments, case studies are nothing but the polity part of the governance part of it. So the example of the constitution here is nothing but the fundamental duty itself says that it is our duty to protect the environment and the wildlife, right? And going further with respect to Supreme Court judgments, the recent Supreme Court judgments on Jallikattu issue, or the prevention, coming to law, that is Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, or coming to the example here or case study here, the best example is Baba Amte or Prakash Amte's example, wherein the injured and the orphaned animals, they have reared it in their own zoo setup, right? So that all that can be given as examples here. Coming to mythology, the Vishnu's Dashavatara, wherein Vishnu is seen in different forms of animals in every stage, right? So it is nothing but the Lord is represented in the form of animals at different stages here. So it is for example, a fish, or even the tortoise here, right? Or pig, right? So, and also in the Indian mythology, the animals are used as the vehicles. For example, the lion, tiger, peacock, or even mouse, right? So it is nothing but different embodiments of God Himself. So that tells that we should equally respect and every animal here, right? So then coming to the quote of Gandhiji, which says nation is decided on the way they treat animals, right? So that quote, or coming to philosophies, John Locke talks about animals do have feelings, or the other Indian philosophy on Jainism, which says ahimsa is the greatest virtue. So all this can be the value additions with respect to animal rights. So similarly, see, I've given you different examples. I've given you different examples across all the papers and even the sub topics as well. So you need to do this exercise for other topics as well. So these are the value additions that can enrich your answer, that can help you cross that 450, 470 plus score. Clear? So with that in mind, moving on to the next part of the discussion, that is the second part of the step 5, wherein I'll be discussing about whether you should have a different strategy for different paper, especially when there are similar topics asked. For example, in 2016, the question was on similar on smart cities, and it was asked in both GS1 and GS3. So let's see how the structure will differ, and what are the aspects that I should give more importance when it comes to GS1, and what are the important things that I should give. What is the importance that I should give when it comes to GS3? Clear? So coming to this, which says, with a brief background of quality of urban life, introduce the objectives and strategy of smart city program. So basically the question here, the approach is, you need to initially bring out the problems or the present state of quality of life that we can see in an urban city. Then with this background, you need to say what are the objectives and what is the strategy that is adopted to overcome this issue. Clear? So let's see. First, I'll obviously, when I say GS1, it is the geography, society, and history. So more importance should be given to the first two aspects here. Of course, history cannot be brought in here. So let's move on. The first part is the as I said, the quality of life, the present issues. Let's see the present issues. That is inequality. It is the best example would be the Mumbai, where it not only houses super class rich people there, but also it houses Asia's largest slum, that is the Ravi here, right? So that can lead to class conflict and other social problems. Then obviously, because of the push and pull factors, where more people are moving to the urban sector, it leads to illegal encroachments, right? And also it might lead to different kinds of diseases, increase in the spread of diseases as well, right? Because of unhygienic conditions, and ghettoization. So here it is nothing but where the people are separated from the main city. A group of people, the reasons can be because of the ethnicity, race, or the social economic factors of people come from different states. So they form a group there, right? So that social bonding is not there in people. So that is another issue with respect to urban sectors, right? And also it might this reason might also lead to increase in crime rates, and communalization of cities, which actually leads to disharmony in the society overall, right? So when I say communalization of cities is nothing but like one community staying at a place together, for example Muslim mohallas or Brahminical agraharas or Christian colonies, right? These can be the examples where it disturbs the overall harmony of the society. And all this, right, all this, and again with this you can also include examples of the solid waste management and the traffic congestion, etc., right? So this is with respect to the quality of life, the present issues with the quality of life in urban sector. And then you can come up with what are the objectives and strategy of the smart cities. So the overall aim of smart city is to improve the overall quality of urban cities, right? So that is the main reason, and also with that to improve the growth of the city. So the strategy that is adopted here is the area-based approach, where the local aspiration and the local needs of the people are given more importance. The residents become a part of the development process. So there is a kind of a social contract, a stakeholder mentality with respect to the cities and the people here. So that is the strategy that they have adopted. And obviously with the increase in population in the urban cities and with the need of economic growth, right, so comes the importance of infrastructure. When I say physical infrastructure, it is the roads, bridges, then the smart grids, the power grids, then proper drainage system, all that. And when it comes to social infrastructure, it is the schools, universities, then hospitals, proper sanitation, right, all that. So this too becomes equally important to sustain this huge population in the cities, and also to promote the growth of the city as well. Then the other objective and strategy is to provide a clean and sustainable environment, which becomes very important, especially when you see a city. When you think of a city, the first thing that comes to your mind is major issue from the, especially the metro cities, is the traffic congestion, and second thing is the solid waste management, that is the solid waste disposal, untreated waste, all that. So this becomes very important here. And even clear, I mean, to reduce the air pollution and the water pollution, all that, which enhances the productivity of the human life, right? So that can come into picture here. Then obviously all these problems, like most of the problems, they are trying to solve it through the use of technology here, that is ICT, the information communication technology, be it with respect to intelligent traffic management systems, to smart grids that they can come up with, or the power grids, right, or the solar energy, usage of solar energy in electrical equipments, etc. So this is what the concept of the objective and the strategy of smart cities in order to solve the problems of the urban cities. Clear? So let's move on to the GS3 question, where it said what are smart cities, a direct question, and examine their relevance in terms of urban development. So here the approach is directly, you can start off with the definition of smart cities, and then you can state the objectives and the strategy. You can draw a diagram here. If it is a 4-point objective, your strategy, it can be put in a rectangle, or if it's 5, you can put a pentagon and depict it. And then you can start off with the relevance of it, right? So the relevance of smart cities in urban development. So let's see. As I said, since it is economics paper, the facts becomes important. Here you can say, according to the survey report, which is 2011 report, which says 31% of the population live in urban cities, and the cities contribute to 63% of GDP, right? And it is predicted that by 2030, the 31% population will increase to 40% population in cities, and the 63% of GDP will increase to 75% of it. So that gives you the gravity of the situation, that gives you the huge growth potential, and also at the same time how to balance the potential, the population density of that region. So that is one best example wherein you can see the relevance of smart cities here, right? The second is with respect to infrastructure. Again, as I've explained even in the previous one, both the physical and the societal infrastructure, because this is equally important to sustain this, right? The best example here would be, if you look at any cities, even for example Bangalore, most of the time, productive time of the youths, it goes in traveling itself, right? The same thing can be if the traffic congestion gets reduced, so there will be more productivity. Clear? And better standards of living in terms of health, education, proper drainage system, right? and good waste disposal system. All this comes under the infrastructure part itself, and also for that you need funding. It is said that the World Bank says that a 20,000 or 20 lakh crore, I'm not sure with the number, is required for development of cities in India. And in fact, the smart cities, I think it's allocated some 1,000 crores. So this is the right step in developing the cities. So that fact, if you want, it can be put here. Then reduce inequalities. Obviously, with the technology coming into place, with internet access, there'll be more opportunities for development here, right? And with better infrastructure. Then improving the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So obviously, when this tier 2 and tier 3 cities get developed, the burden on tier 1 cities gets reduced, right? And at the same time, this tier 2, tier 3 cities get developed. The report, you can quote the report here, the Ministry of Urban Development, which gives a report on this ranking of smart cities in tier 2, and Nagpur, Vadodara and Ahmedabad have topped the ranks. So that can be one example mentioned here. And again, clean and sustainable environment, as I've mentioned earlier also, the air pollution, reduction of it, all that will help in better lifestyle, reduction of diseases, better productivity, and reduction of pollution, etc. All that can be mentioned. So this shows the relevance of smart cities with respect to the development of urban sector. Clear? Now here there's nothing like since it is examined, I need to say the cons of it. So here there's nothing like we don't require a smart city. So we do require a smart city, but what are the challenges involved? So that is what can come in the second half of your answers. So let's see the challenges here. So it will lead to further development or ignoring of other underdeveloped cities. So what do I mean by that is, there will be few cities that will be concentrated and that will develop. So it will be like islands of development in a sea of deprivation. Right? There will be many other cities which requires equal attention. So it is basically to do with the selection of cities. So that can be one challenge here. Then lack of infrastructure. As I said, it requires a huge funding, and whether our country has that capacity to fund every city in that manner becomes a very important task. And the usage of technology in terms of power grids or drainage systems, or the physical and societal infrastructure, all that becomes an important challenge here. Then moving on to the next one, as I said, smart cities involves citizens' participation. So lack of participation will also be a greater challenge. And since local aspirations are given more importance, the local needs, it can be a debate or a conflict between the local and the global debates, whether that particular policy or the best practices, can it be implemented or not. So that can be another challenge here. So these are the challenges that you can mention, and the best way to conclude this answer is to give a way forward, wherein we can say these the local self-governments, there should be capacity building of the local self-government so that they can float the tenders in a transparent manner when it comes to development. Or you can talk about the scheme, that is Pradhan Mantri, the PMG Disha scheme, where digital education can be promoted through it. So that, because only when you have that digital literacy, you can make the best use of this smart city concept. Or convergence of Amrut, the other urban development related scheme, and the smart city, which will be a big boost to all the cities of India. So that can be the other point. So like this, there are many other points, or even best practices that you can see in Brazil. I think it is Sao Paulo, the leading smart city in Brazil. So that best practices can be implemented here. So this is the best way to give a way forward or conclude in this particular answer. So I hope now you have understood the strategy that is involved when you write an answer of similar topic on different papers. So basically what I mean is, see, the value additions I've already explained, so that becomes very important with each paper. Apart from that, what angle should be given more importance becomes important here, depending on the paper here. So when it is with respect to the GS1, the societal angle, geographical angle should be given more importance. When it comes to polity, the political angle, administrative issues and governance issues should be given first importance. Then comes the societal and economic issues. When it comes to economics paper, that is GS3, the data, facts, right, the poverty, the unemployment related stuffs, infrastructure, agriculture, industries, those that should be given importance here. See, at times, almost all the three dimensions is common, like societal, political, economic. But depending on the position of the question here in each paper, the priority changes. That's it, right? So that is the fun of having a different strategy for different paper here. I hope there's more clarity now. So from the discussion, you must have realized there's nothing like a rocket science or a magic to score more than 450 or 470 plus, right? I've given you a simple and a right direction. You need to stick to it, and magic in itself is nothing but believing in yourself. And if you can believe in yourself, anything is possible, right? And don't limit yourself. So many people think that, okay, this is what I can do, but your mind is actually limitless, right? It can go as far as as possible. So do believe in yourself and remember that you can achieve it, right? And if this series has made a difference in your answer writing, do comment below using an hashtag AwareBaba. And in the next step, that is, I'll be combining the 6th and 7th step, wherein I'll introduce you to how to write a good answer, and also the importance of time management. So how do you write an answer in 10 marker in 7 minutes, and how do you write an 15 marker in 11 minutes? So this will be the objective of the next discussion, and this will be the last discussion, right? Thank you.